we have a world record amount involved as state tax. Tapos 20 plus years na, 25 plus years na hindi pa rin makolekta. Kaya hindi ba tayo interesado malaman bakit hindi makolekta ito?
Supporters of Isko Moreno are calling on other candidates to back out of the presidential race. They said personal ambitions should be set aside in favor of beating their common opponent, Bongbong Marcos.
Former President Erap Estrada has a specific birthday wish for former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Estrada urged GMA to give politics another run.
We continue our conversations with aspirants for the coming elections. With us today is a senatorial candidate. What are his plans and platforms? And how will he act on his intentions for a better Philippines? We discuss in this episode of Face the Chiefs. Please stay right there. We will be joined by our guest and our other chiefs when we return. Welcome to the Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama po natin online, Ami Pamintuan. Yan po siya nasa Philippine Star sa port area sa Manila. And with us here in Mandaluyong in studio, Ed Lingao of One News. Chiefs, good evening.
Good evening. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. Ami, ano ba binabantayan natin?
Katatapos lang ng laging handa eh. Ano ba gusto nyo? COVID ba o politika?
Well, ano
Sige.
malaki?
Yung
Baka
COVID,
yan, eh.
well, sabi ni Secretary Duque, sana daw magkaroon ng political will ng Congress na gawing mandatory vaccination kasi bumaba na nga daw yung uptake ng vaccines and boosters. At nag-aalala daw sila sa barn, especially kasi 25% lang yung vaccination. Ramadan ngayon, maraming mga mass gatherings doon. So,
At
nag-aalala
during
sila
Ramadan,
na mini surge.
But also during Ramadan, I'm not sure if they're allowed to get the vaccines.
Yun ang problema. Saka yun daw ang sabi
You
nga
have to check
doon,
that.
meron daw mga vaccine na hindi nga halal. So nagkakaproblema sila.
May ganun ba?
And that's for primary vaccines, iba pa yung usapan yung booster.
Sa booster,
Kasi I think sa boostering, we're only at what, 11 million or 12 million, which is 10% of total population.
Basta it's so low, they're concerned about shots going to waste. And one alternative is ipamigay sa
Ibang bansa.
ibang bansa. Myanmar, for example.
And Papua New Guinea ngayon.
Yeah.
Pilipino kasi pag libre, ganyan eh. Pero pag ibenta mo sa Lazada siguro yan, maraming bibilin.
Dapat pahirapan ulit yung supply. Di ba? Para hinanap ng mga tao. Mas maganda problema yung hinahabol ng mga tao. But anyway, our guest today might have a lot of things to say. He knows a thing or two about
Ito
public
yung
health as well.
Gusto natin tanungin, anong balita?
Ayan. Yan, sinabi na po ni Ed ang balita ang ating pong balita. Ang ating balita ang ating guest. Now joining us is Carl Balita, a senatorial candidate under Action Demokrata. Good evening, Carl Balita, running for senator.
Yeah, nice to be here. Nakakakaba, nakaharap yung the Chiefs.
Yan, uwi na tayo. Wala na yung boses natin. Ay, pati boses mo naluma.
I'm used to being a panel member. Ngayon, ako yung parang magre-revalida, para magdi-defend ng aking thesis or dissertation.
Hindi naman,
But I
hindi
love
naman,
it.
hindi naman.
I love it to be with you.
Sige. Anyway, welcome. We're very happy to have you here. Nasabi mo nga, sanay ka rin sa media. Pero at the same time, you're, as we say, multi-hyphenated. Diba? You're a registered nurse, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm a nurse, I'm a midwife, I'm also a licensed teacher, yeah.
Oh, you have some review centers as well?
Yeah, I have expanded my review programs all over the country. Like I have 120 branches. I have bridged like 1 million young Filipinos to be ready for the Filipinos in the world through my review center.
So you have education, you have public health, you're in media. What's the main agenda for you?
Yeah, the 3Ks, the 3 crises that we are facing in the pandemic times. The health crisis, I happen to have, I have 2 licenses as health professional. The learning crisis, and I happen to be a doctor of education. And of course, the economic crisis, yung kabuhayan. I hosted a show with ABS-CBN for 20 years, focusing on the micro, small, and medium enterprises. And I was a micro enterprise myself, and I'm into several organizations as well in business. Yeah.
Let me zoom in dun sa, in particular dun sa, sa learning crisis. I'm sure you've heard about this, yung study ng UNICEF tsaka ng UNESCO, na 10% of Filipino kids na nasa 10 years old lamang ang kayang magbasa ng simple text.
Yeah.
And we're, I think, second to the lowest in East Asia after ano nga ba yun? The Lao Republic.
Yeah, that was even prior to the pandemic. And can you imagine the digital divide that happened during the pandemic? So I thought it was actually one of the reasons why I'm running. I want to offer myself as the only teacher running and the only doctor of education running. I want to be part of the solution because I'm very concerned, I'm very worried. Imagine K-12, gagraduate ngayon ng college ang K-12 products of our senior high school. And then yung PISA, remember the result of the PISA, ano sila ngayon? 20 years old sila ngayon. So, I mean, we need to track.
When sa review centers nyo, I mean, I imagine you also get a lot of data and insights. And by the time dumating sila sa iyo, these are students already midstream, already maybe past grade school, maybe past high school. But ano yung nakikita mong gap? And what's the state of the education that they bring by the time they get to your review centers?
Well, res ipsa loquitur, the thing speaks for itself. The passing rate of like teachers board is within the range of 30 to 40% only. And that's even with review centers helping them out. How much more kung wala yon? Actually, dapat walang
And to take the board, ito yung nagtapos na ng college.
Correct. Yun na yun. And hindi mo naman sasabihin na iba yung ini-exam nila dun sa natutunan nila. So really, we really have to have a more comprehensive assessment of what's going on in education. That's why, I wish that there will be, I'm pushing for an EDCOM 2. In 1990, EDCOM 1 happened, Education Commission happened. And that led to, di ba, DEX dati, nabiyak sa tatlo, trifocalized ang education. Then yung teachers, dating nasa civil service, nalagay sa PRC. Ngayon, I'm pushing for EDCOM for 4 reasons. Number 1, the EDCOM 1, yung mga recommendations niya. Number 2, yung K-12. Number 3, yung 4th Industrial Revolution. It's giving us a new landscape in the world of work, and we have to adjust education for it. And number 4, yung post-pandemic education, the digital divide. Ang daming issues sa education. And syempre, central dyan yung learner, how ready they are. And 1/3 of our children are malnourished.
Yes, right.
And that's not from school age, that's from birth or even intrauterine life. And these are all adding up to the complexity of why education was that bad, as you mentioned, even prior to the pandemic. And we're trying our best. Learning continuity programs had been here. Teachers are doing their best. Kaya lang yung limitations talagang. We have to understand it really more comprehensively and deeply. And that's why I'm calling for EDCOM 2.
Okay, doon naman tayo sa other hats mo, nurse and midwife. The pandemic highlighted the weaknesses of our public healthcare system, no? kung mananalo po kayo, anong balak niyong isulong na batas
Yeah.
to improve the situation?
You know, there's a very big, good offers. And we looked into theories and hindi naman laging sweldo ang magpapa-stay sa kanila. After all, hindi natin kayang tapatan yung sweldo ang binibigay sa kanila. I'm pushing for the Omnibus Positive Practice Environment Act. I call it Omnibus kasi hindi dapat maiwan yung ibang profession from doctors down, orderly, etc. And I call it positive practice environment. Kasi maniwala ba kayo na ang mga nurses, for example, natin are still job order? They're still contractual in status for several years. I mean, contractual ka, may offer sa US, pati pamilya, dala, I don't think you'll stay. So we want that positive practice environment. Number 2, career progression. Number 3, continuing professional development. It should be part of the entire experience of that worker. In other words, paano kung magkaroon ulit ng surge? Naglagay man tayo ng cap, no, sa deployment natin, kaya mo bang pigilan yung mga yan? It's their right to actually go anywhere they can have a source for their livelihood. Ma'am, yun ang aking concern. I want to take care of those who are taking care of us. Hindi totoong namatay mag-isa ang namatay sa COVID, as they say. No, they were in the company of our health professionals. At yun ang nakakalungkot because we call them heroes, pero alam niyo naman, you heard it in the news, yung kanilang allowance were delayed and so on. We have to make them feel special this time because we need them badly. Otherwise, they are the choice of the world.
Do we have the resources for that?
I think so. We have the resources to buy shields, face shields. I mean, we have the resources to build hospital, as many presidential goals are promising. Then if you can afford technology and infrastructure, then let's not forget that our human resource also is an investment. We have to invest on them so that we can make full use of their being choice of the world. They should be the best for the Filipinos.
Yeah. Pero siyempre, iba
Sir
yung
Balita,
Yes po.
looking at the surveys, hindi ka ba na-frustrate na yung mga doctors who are running, medyo hindi yata masyadong mataas ang performance sa survey? Hindi ba kayo na-frustrate? O kulang ba yung pag-deliver nyo ng message nyo? Or people don't seem to care kahit nasa gitna tayo ng pandemya?
Well, I just hope that the people will be more appreciative of the roles of the health workers. May mga doktor, ako, dual health professional na tumatakbo, pero totoo, nasa dulo kami. I don't want to believe na hindi kami na-appreciate. I think masyado lang maraming resources yung mga nasa front, mga nandun sa taas ng list. But malayo pa naman po, we still have time to communicate really our message. Na kung totoong nasa gitna tayo ng pandemya and you feel the suffering in the areas of health, I think we should have preference for those who are health professionals. Not only health advocates at that, health professionals in the list.
Let me zoom in dun sa problem, for example, ng job orders. No? Siyempre, iba yung problema ng nasa private sector na mga nurse at yung nasa public sector na mga nurse. In fact, ang reklamo nga ng mga nasa private sector, sila yung mababa ang sweldo
Mas malala.
compared dun sa mga nasa public sector na mga nurse. Kasi standardized na yun kahit pa paano eh.
Yeah.
But how do you intend to go about that? These are private sector nurses. What kind of legislation would be or could be made available to address those situations in the private sector?
My pushers are some of the leaders of the hospitals. They want to give the best salary for the nurses to keep them because they are important, and the other health professionals. But you know naman their problems with PhilHealth.
Yes,
payments. Yun eh. Sabi nila kung mababayaran lang kami on time, tama. I mean, in crisis, mga health professionals din naman mga leaders yan eh. They're very compassionate as well for the people. Kasi hindi naman natin pwedeng itaas ang salary, then itaas ang cost of healthcare. Hindi pwedeng mangyari yon. So, they're willing to actually invest on their human resource. Pero with the complexity ng payments for them, kawawa talaga sila.
You're running for senator. What's a simple policy tweak that can fix PhilHealth?
Put a financial guy in PhilHealth. And stop being the investigator, the prosecutor, the judge, and the executioner of the hospitals. They should be more of an enabler than a regulator. They should be partners of the hospital because anything that's good for the hospital will be good for the healthcare system and the patients. They have to revisit the real mandate of PhilHealth, which is a financial institution to enable and empower the health institutions, not to just regulate them.
But wasn't Dick Morales well, I know he was a former general, but at the same time, in his later years as in the military, he was head of, I think, AFP Mutual Benefits Association, which is in itself a financial institution in charge of the insurance system of the AFP.
Well-
so people kind of assume that, he would have the wherewithal to fix things.
This is bigger than what he used to run. This is really a financial institution. We have to realize that PhilHealth is a financial institution and supposed to be in charge of our information system in the health sector. I don't think, having managed one financial institution in one sector of our government is enough. It really has to be a financial person who understands it well, especially investments and other areas of financial management.
Your passion, your advocacies for education and public health, really, where they intersect, you find the children.
Yeah.
And you were talking about that cohort of children who took the PISA, and sabi mo nga, in a few years, 20 years na, and they'll be entering the workforce. I want to talk about the cohort who are entering kinder to grade 2.
Yeah.
Itong during the past pandemic.
Yeah, that's correct.
And in 10 years, you have these kids who will be entering the workforce.
Correct.
Who were not only stunted educationally, but also deprived of feeding programs.
Correct.
Diba? So they're also, you would imagine, malnourished physically
Mentally.
and mentally.
Yeah.
And deprived of really basic, fundamental, and the most important educative years
Yes.
of their lives. Paano hahabulin yun by the time they get to be part of the workforce?
We cannot improve what we cannot measure. We really have to measure. We have to conduct a very comprehensive assessment of the learning gaps. And from there, start somewhere. You cannot teach language with a mask on. That's something we have to understand.
That's right.
You cannot just teach it digitally. And, don't forget that school children are in school not only to learn, but to play. They learn through play.
The social skills.
The social skills. And that's why mental health issue became major in these pandemic times. We have to begin with assessment. The Filipinos are good. We adapt so well. The irony is that we doubted a lot of international assessments. But come to think of it, go anywhere in the world, you'll find Filipinos excelling in different areas of expertise. I don't want to sell the Philippines, for example, now that we're attracting investors. I don't want to sell the Philippines because we have a lower labor cost here. No. I want to attract them by the fact that Filipinos are very adaptable, very fast with technology, we have good language skills, and innovative at that. I think with regards to the life skills, we can catch up on that. Maybe English, math, and science were benchmarks of learning in the global context, but let's look at life skills. Let's look at innovation, innovativeness. Maybe that's where we excel. And education is not only about just reading and writing and science. I want to focus that into agriculture, which became an interest of the young. You wouldn't believe it. There are observations that the young people are wanting to go into agriculture, which is a blessing to us. And how many have become plantitos and plantitas, even among adults? How much more are children who have observed it in the same way they're modeling to their parents? I want to take advantage of that. After all, we're an agricultural country. Maybe it's about time we realize the gains of the pandemic rather than the losses we have had in the pandemic times.
But yes, sir, I understand, sir. But sir, iba yung getting interested in a hobby of being a plantito or plantita versus yung
but that's
having it as a
that's
source
the
of
beginning.
income.
Lalo na yung mga plantito, ang daming pinapatay.
But that's the beginning. In fact, that the curiosity is the beginning of learning.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you that I have a proposition that agriculture should not be part of tech-voc livelihood in our tracks. In K-12, it should actually go with STEM. And I want to call STEM STEAM. Because what we lack in agriculture is science, technology, engineering. Can you imagine the attraction it will create among the young people that of course, the preference is for STEM. And if they have STEAM there and they become classmates to the future engineers, the future veterinarians and botanists and so on, we have an aging group. I mean, our mean age of farmers is 57, 59. They're retiring soon. We have to fortify our educational system to attract more young people to go into agriculture.
Yeah.
And science technology can attract them into it.
What about the more intangible aspects, not just to education, but to formation?
Yeah.
We're talking about values,
Yeah.
right? We're talking about citizenship and so on. And I ask this, of course, in the context that I'm sure you will recognize that mga tao, bangayan ng bangayan. On social media, there are no rules. People are trying to outshout each other. There's no respect for opinion, and so on down the line, all the way to nationalism. How do you instill all of these things, and what do we do with the education system so that values also can be, assuming that you see that there is a problem there as well?
We have to go back to the basics. You would remember those days in our lives when you can fail in science and math, but never in GMRC. Right? It will be a disgrace to the family if you failed in that subject area. I think we have to go back to the basics of values education and integrate it along the course of our
Did we
curriculum.
lose it at a certain point? I mean, was that tangibly lost in the process?
Well, it's actually the changes in the society that we did not catch up with. Like social media was probably not part of the equation when they were preparing the curriculum. Because social media is more powerful now than the traditional media, and probably more powerful than the teacher they have. And there are modeling, that the students being hungry for role models are seeing it among the adults. So if there's a sector to blame, these are the adults who are not giving good examples to our children.
Yeah.
In social media, at least, that's open for everyone. And the education, we will never give up on hope, especially if we have the best teachers. And let me put it this way. How do you attract the best and the brightest to become teachers when the salary of teachers are always lower than the counterparts? Like become a soldier now. A uniform personnel, you get 29,000 entry salary. Become a teacher and you get 24,000. Everybody now wants to be a policeman. Hong Kong offers 37,000 minimum salary to domestic helpers, and they're attracting our teachers. Why? They got a tutor together as a bonus to having a domestic helper. We have to also take care of the benefits, and we should be able to attract the best and the brightest by providing good offers for them. And the complaints of many teachers now, their time is so consumed by administrative, clerical, and all those tasks, paperworks, and they have very limited time preparing for the lessons and actually delivering the lesson. And mentoring, especially the challenge of the digital education, is assessment. How do you assess performance virtually? It's nearly very, very difficult, if not impossible. So we have to look onto all of this. And that's why you need the teacher in the Senate. Because in the past, you just invite a subject matter expert during hearings. Now, at least if you have a senator who understands education in that level of education that I achieved, maybe it will make a difference.
And again, you have that divide between public and private school teachers. The public school teachers are better paid than the private school teachers, so you have a migration as well to the public schools. Going back to that question, what do we do about it? Or how?
It's in the Constitution. The complementarity of the public and private institutions of learning is in the Constitution. It's just that now they are competitors. They're not supposed to be competitors. But imagine if the setup is the private schools offer courses or specialties that are not offered by public school, then the government has every reason to support. And this is really government supporting, and education is a right. Let's not forget that. And even scholarships suffered for freshmen because of the budget issues for CHED. It's really in the Constitution, complementarity. We just have to make it work.
Okay, let's put on your other hat, media. How would you assess the state of media right now in terms of freedom, in terms of rights, in terms of safety, and in terms of our role to help vet and provide reliable information to the people?
It's actually the media being also in in the crossroads of finding its relevance amidst the fact that there is a new media that has become very powerful, which is social media. And therefore, the traditional media, the mainstream media, with all the ethics and the ombudsman operating in its system, should show the public that differentiation. But the moment the traditional media becomes very similar in its context and its ethical practices with that of the social media, as if there are no rules that they follow, we're seeing the dawning of.
Yeah, that's us getting disrupted
Yeah.
by technology. But it's something more basic. Do you believe that we have press freedom? And do you believe that freedom has been under threat?
It's always under threat ever since. Our assertion for it being the fourth state they call is important. And as to whether we have it, I think we still have it. And we want to believe that we have it, and we have to keep it that way. But really, our responsibility is to ourselves. I mean, having been there as well, I've been aware. I mean, I've been trained to practice some ethics in it. I think we have to differentiate the traditional media with all the rest, so that we become the reference of the social media and the other influencers.
And conversely, but let me be the devil's advocate here. Conversely, do you see the need for further regulation of not just the press, but as well of free speech?
And of social media, for that matter.
Yeah, social media.
Yeah, when it's free, why should it be regulated? I think it's just putting on laws when the intentions are bad. Just like any crime, where intention matters. You know, I can be wrong for my perspective. Even philosophy assures that. The realists are antithesis to the idealist. But they are not one is not necessarily wrong because it differs from the other.
So you believe the free market of ideas works?
It has to work with some responsibilities of laws that govern intentions.
Yeah, but I guess our concern is beyond responsibilities. Even if let's say this, for example, right now. Even the most responsible media right now is drowned out by fake news.
Yeah.
It's drowned out by trolls. It's drowned out by disinformation and misinformation. That is usually the context for a lot of people saying that the platforms too have to be regulated. Somebody has to be responsible to make sure that at least the truth and reliable information has a fighting chance.
Well, my point really, if there are laws, for example, against libel, which are existing, and slander and other bad-intended attacks, I think it's something that will be good enough. But you know, the nature of social media really is what we have to admit as a free reign of ideas. But when you have better proposition, you know, just like you would imagine right in front McDonald's, there is a little vendor selling McDonald's. And people would go to McDonald's because of the brand that McDonald's offer versus that McDonald's by the street. I think that particular seller has a market and McDonald's has a
But
market.
let me bring...
My point, sir, is this. Very, very simply put, I think the media, the mainstream media, should also differentiate itself from
Yeah,
the rest of
but
it.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, and not to put words in your mouth,
yeah.
but it's as if you're saying, look, we just have to do better.
Yes.
Right? But let me bring in back your education background. Right now, we have a lot of people really falling for fake news.
Yeah.
Right? Not knowing their history. Not knowing what happened during the Marcos years.
Yes.
In denial over things that have been decided, not just by history, but by the Supreme Court,
Yeah.
and so on. And so you have the children that you so care about
Yeah.
to be educated properly in STEM and so on. We're talking about values, but they're losing all sorts of perspective on history,
Yeah.
not because media is not doing a good job. It's but purely simply because
The availability.
yeah, and also because we're losing on social media, frankly.
That's
We're
part
losing to
of,
the algorithms, we're losing to, and you know, fake news will always be better packaged than the truth.
Yeah. And
Diba?
it became more interesting.
Yeah, but it will always be more interesting
And,
than truth if I can always make up a headline.
And by the way, let me put here one cognitive bias that we all need to understand as part of human nature, the Dunning-Kruger effect, the Dunning-Kruger, where, it's when the less competent are more confident than
That's right.
the experts. Yeah, and that's what's actually happening. And that's human nature. That's part of human psychology.
Yes.
And that's why it's just it's a tug of war.
Yes, but now you have the technology further fueling and enabling that. I guess it goes back to the question, when you have technology, AI, machine learning, fueling that and backing that against
even
the best
worsening it.
efforts that we can do. I mean, to Ed's point, do you see a need to actually intervene and to actually, to put it bluntly, to actually regulate the platforms that we never anticipated before?
We have to see some models as to how it's done. Like China doesn't have Facebook. Did it work well for China that they don't have it?
They have their own Great Wall.
They have their own.
Yeah. And not to mention, you look at Russia.
Yeah, look at Russia. The thing is, it's something we cannot answer just by opinion. I happen to come from the world of science, and to me, evidence and scientific findings are only what matters. My opinion won't. The thing is, I'd like to see some models of regulated social media.
But you do have studies also already showing that, related to PISA, that students cannot distinguish between a statement of fact and an opinion.
Correct. And that's critical. Critical thinking is lost among even those who take the board exam. That's actually our challenge. We have to teach critical thinking to those who even graduated college, because we have to strengthen that for them to pass the board exam. And this continuously, even tolerance is very, tolerance, your respect. I think it's lost along the way. You cannot, you listen not with the intention to understand, but with the intention to respond. And that's very bad. It's not effective communication. We seek first to understand and to be understood, right? But that's not the way it goes. Really, it's a big challenge, not only of schools, but homes. And remember, the first school of children are their homes. And that's why we have to go back to it.
Well, let me extend that discussion further with this. There are some candidates who are proposing legislation against fake news. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, if you have considered this. Is that a valid proposition, or is that a dangerous proposition?
Especially if the intention is really to falsify or to damage integrity or to miseducate. Miseducating our young people is a crime in itself. And it has to be, for that, there has to be some laws, really. Especially if the intention is to damage knowledge and to miseducate. That's very dangerous.
But don't people have the right to be wrong?
Or ignorant. Or ignorant.
Or ignorant. I think what you're saying is that it depends on the motive.
The motive,
of
the intention.
Of the people involved,
Yeah,
or
the
the
intention.
intentions of the people
Yeah.
involved. But that does get to a pretty tricky part where you have to figure out the motives of those who are involved in dispersing these kinds of information. But in the end po, ganun, is there a need to legislate against fake news, or is that dangerous ground already?
I think legislation against badly intended fake news or faking of the news for bad intention, I always go back to intention, because that's what makes a crime a crime. Like if you killed for self-defense, you have a defense. But if you killed with the intention to kill, that's a totally different story. You see, it's something we have to look into deeply, because the society is so damaged, so divided now, that I think the evils are celebrating their triumph over their bad tactics, which the bandwagon effect is felt.
Let's try to get some issues your way. Also on other things. You of course talked about specific sectors, public health, education. We need to take care of that, granted. But jobs in general, reviving this economy. What are your ideas?
Don't forget that the MSMEs are generators of some 60+% of the jobs. And they are the most hard hit. The reason why we lost jobs during the pandemic is because the 99.5% of all the businesses have suffered. And out of the 99.5%, 89% are micro enterprises. it's easy to recover them if we support them early enough. And we have to make them appreciate the adaptive business measures. You know, there are some, for example, restaurants that have closed but opened their kitchen as commissary for online delivery, and to their surprise, they're now selling more. So it's really a matter of engaging them into the new way of doing business as some adaptive business measures. If we want to save the economy, we have to save the micro, small, and medium enterprises. And you know what? I'm proposing for a micro enterprise commission as a one-stop shop for our micro enterprises so that they can access the integrated services and supports provided for by the government, DOST, DA, DTI, and even, of course, the financial institutions. Maraming pera na sinabing available for them, pero tanongin nyo kung meron silang capability to access them.
So one-stop meaning everything from registration to
Everything.
credit.
To make the ease, to make sure that there's ease and lower cost of doing business.
Pero yung mga ganun kasi, minsan ang problema is the corruption involved eh. I mean,
Yeah.
like it or not, when you have things easier to be rolled out, some people in government tend to make more money out of it. How do you intend to go about ensuring that nothing is lost to leakage?
Well, it's all about removing the human discretion and human interaction in the process. And the solution is actually in business itself. It's digitalization. You know, digitalization, which is happening in many corporate settings, have removed human transaction and simplified, because the more complex things are, the more corruption
Yes.
it could be, and of course, removing human interaction. It happens in many corporate transactions. Why can it not happen in government? So, and siguro, it's about time let's select leaders whose intention is not to corrupt. I mean, I'd like to take this opportunity. Ang mahal palang gumastos.
Yeah, but
tumakbo.
pero
Ang gastos
to
pala.
that point, there's one aspect. I can imagine digitalization, automation, taking care. I mean, we've seen that in so many LGUs.
Yes.
Di ba? Parang everything from tax collection to assessment.
Pero
Hulaan ko.
there's the PhilHealth example.
Exactly. And ako, I was gonna say Congress.
Yeah.
Di ba? Yung pork barrel. That's transaction. Di ba? Between the executive and the legislators, you can't, or can you? Does technology actually mitigate against that on the premise na the congressmen and the senators, one way or another, will still be lobbying for some sort of pork barrel?
You know, technology can fix genes. Why can't it not fix system? Unless is corruption the system or is corruption in the system? I mean, unless we're giving up on hope that it can be done. But you know, with the use of technology, you remove human interaction, you remove human discretion, you make everything transparent, and probably
Hindi, kaya nga,
even...
yung pork barrel, how do you take away discretion there when it's transactional between a, let's face it, Malacanang and the two highest institutions?
And that's probably, that's the answer there, is we have to look into really revisiting our political system. Should we go federal? Should we go parliamentary? And it's about time we do this, because the great disruption of this pandemic is offering us, you know, some amount of very, very big elbow rooms for change.
What are your ideas there?
My idea is let's call constitutional assembly in 2022, a referendum in 2023, and probably a major shift in our political system by 2024.
What will be the main hallmark of that shift?
The need of the times. The fact that, like we have seen some improvements with the way ARMM has been moving with the Bangsamoro organic law, we're seeing some progress there, and maybe federalism should be started in the early part of this incoming administration, and maybe we can rethink about shifting the unitary presidential to parliamentary system, which will make, you know, a very harmonized legislative and executive body.
You'll trust the parliamentary system to a weak party system?
We have to do simultaneously strengthening that. And that's why we have to engage in a referendum and check if the people wants it that way. Alam mo, ang isang nakikita natin dito, the root of all corruption is a very expensive election. Can you imagine a senator having to spend 500 million pesos and a senator is only getting 200 plus thousand.
$500 million na nagastos mo.
No way. I don't have. Even if I have it, in
Okay.
case I have it, which I
Ah,
don't.
sige.
I no. But come to think of it, how will you recover if you're spending $500 million and you're earning 200
Some even
plus
make money out of it.
thousand? That's why. And I mean, even local, it's very
I mean,
surprising.
some even make money out of running.
Yes. Well, they're making money out of it. And it's very sad. Well, bumubuhos yung pera sa tao, hopefully makatulong sa ekonomiya, pero in the end, we're the losers. We're the losers. Like, look at the candidates. Look, bakit kami nasa dulo? I cannot afford television ads. I cannot afford that. Na sumingit lang kami sa ads ni Isko Moreno. How will I afford 3 spots for ₱1 million? I mean, and practical, is that practical at all?
And
I don't
that's
think.
discounted na.
Yeah, that's discounted.
Because of the election law.
I don't even think that that's necessary. But in an archipelagic country like ours, it's very difficult to really reach them. And imagine ako na, 1 million students. I had 1 million students. And I don't have the confidence that I'll be able to generate 15 million votes because they're all over the place, all over the country. So, very big challenge. I think we also have to look into it. Some major structural changes and
Okay.
moral changes.
Si Carl Balita po, tumatakbo po sa pagka-senator. A quick question pala, also because you're in media, I'm really just curious. Balita is your real name?
Yeah, it's my real name. We came from Batangas. Then my
Saan sa
lola migrated
Batangas?
to Mabini. Then my grandfather went to Mindoro. She fell in love with a Mindoreña. So, but my mother is from Pangasinan. So, layo. Yeah.
Buti nagkita-kita kayo.
Oo nga.
Yun ang magandang balita.
Because of love. Yeah.
Anyway, si Carl Balita po, tumatakbo po under Aksyon Demokratiko. Sir, anong number nyo?
Number 6.
Number
Very
six.
easy. Yeah, gusto ko lang maging mabuting balita. It's not all the time that you get a candidate like us. It's not all the time. And I don't think if I lose, if I'll ever run again, I'm not sure. So, I'm just offering myself now.
Okay, maraming salamat po. Dr. Carl Balita. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
Welcome back to the Chiefs on One News. And now joining us is infectious disease expert Dr. Ronjin Solante, who is also a member of the vaccine expert panel. Doc, welcome back and thank you for joining us again.
Good evening,
Hi,
Doc.
good evening.
Magandang gabi, Doc.
Good evening, Ed, Robbie, and Ami.
Yes, Doc. Of course, we have all heard of the news na mukhang marami-raming mga bakuna na maaring mag-expire in the next few months kung hindi magamit. At medyo mabagal yung ating boostering eh. But at the same time, we've also been hearing na baka i-extend yung expiry ng ibang mga bakuna courtesy of some of the manufacturers. I suppose a lot of people are wondering how that works eh. Pwede bang i-extend lang basta-basta yun? Kasi although sanay tayo na yung corned beef nag-expire na, kinakain pa rin. Pero iba yung bakuna eh. Is it safe to do that? Meron bang concerns about that?
Well, kasama yan sa mga vaccine, no? Yung mga shelf, ang tawag niyan is the shelf life. So there are shelf life that in a vaccine na pwede mo pa siyang isagad, no? I-extend, no? And that should be coming from the vaccine company if they will allow that, okay? So if they will allow like extension of 3 months or six months, then that's acceptable as long as the necessary storage was maintained during that time of ano. And there are process on how to do that. No? So that's one option. But I think the more realistic option is that we need to encourage everyone to get the vaccine. Otherwise, ang mangyayari niyan, baka pamimigay natin sa ibang bansa.
So you're saying there's a built-in allowance doon sa expiry ng mga bakuna that we may be able to have legroom with or wiggle room with?
Yes, Ed. No? Kaya ng mga I think that was last March or February, where there are also vaccines na hanggang 3 months lang, but when they allow, the vaccine companies allow it to extend the shelf life for another 3 months. So nagiging 6 months. No? So parang ganon.
Well, in line with encouraging people to get vaccinated, merong proposal si Joey Concepcion na yun daw vaccine card isama yung booster shot. Are you in favor of that?
Well, no, I'm always in favor of any strategy just to encourage people. Just to encourage people getting the booster. Why? Booster is an important component now of fully vaccinated individual. We know that with fully vaccination or full primary vaccination, it's not enough to protect us. It's not enough. And you see countries who are 87% fully vaccinated, 70% higher than us, kagaya ng Malaysia, Indonesia, and even South Korea. But what happened? No? There are still a lot of these, what we call breakthrough infections, and part of which is really because of the waning immunity of the primary vaccine series.
Pero pag ginawa yan, you mean you want to expand the booster program. Di ba? Hindi lang sa seniors, saka yung immune compromised. Kapag ginawa na definition ng fully vaccinated will include the booster, di ba? Mag-expand.
Yes. I mean, no? So we just have to be specific with this, no? So, for example, there are 65 million who already received the primary vaccine series, and there are only those who received 11 million who received the booster. So that is a lag of around 50 million that should receive the booster. Now, if this 50 million nag-uwi ng immunity nito by May, June, July, and we have this super spreader event, mga election gatherings, no? Will the Philippines be safe during those months? So that's the most important question. If we can vaccinate and continue to be giving the booster, we focus on the booster. Hindi na muna tayo mag-focus sa second booster. Ang pagtuna natin ngayon yung first booster sa general population, 18 years old and above. And this is where we should be emphasizing in order to maintain that wall of immunity na hindi mangyayari sa atin yung mga nangyayari sa ibang bansa.
Is there a serious discussion about expanding the booster program to include the general population?
That's the second booster, Ami. No,
Yeah.
For now, the second booster is only for those who are 60 years old. Once approved by the FDA, because you have to amend the EUA for you to give the second booster because all of these are under EUA.
I'm asking if there is a serious discussion to expand the first booster program. Kasi sabi niyo nagwa-wane na yung efficacy ng vaccines for the general population. So pinag-uusapan ba to seriously na i-expand yung booster, first booster?
Yeah, the first booster is given to 18 years old and above. So that's the current recommendation. Now, the problem is among the 18 years old and above na nakatanggap na ng primary vaccine series, so we're talking about the 65 million, only 11 million ang nagpa-booster. So nakita mo yung disparity. That's really a big disparity.
Yes, sir. So, sir, I'd like to ask you for a more specific example. If only to drive home the point na nagwe-wane na yung primary doses sa mga tao. For example, si Juan na nagpa second dose nung November o December last year, by when na siya talagang nanganganib na magkasakit? Para lang may idea yung taong bayan.
Yeah. Actually, Ed, by the third month or fourth month, ang protection mo na lang is only 30 to 40%, or even less than that, by the third month and fourth month, no? So if you will wait for 6 months, basically 10, 20, or even 0.
So parang back to zero siya, back to square one.
So yes, we're talking about the Omicron, no? Because
Yes,
the
sir.
Omicron is the virus that's really heavily mutated, and ang bagsak talaga ng protection niya with the Omicron. Kaya wala naman tayong Delta na eh. So we're not about Delta. We're talking about Omicron. And that's why when Omicron came, early November, we recommended for the booster, the general population, 18 years, hoping that by the time that it will come to the Philippines, January, medyo mataas-taas na yung protection natin, no? And that's again. So after 6 months, what if after 6 months, we still have Omicron? Granting, like BA2 lang to. Hindi pa nakapasok ang Omicron XE. So again, there will be breakthrough infection or reinfection.
Yeah, but to that point, total nabanggit nyo na po, what do we now understand better? We've only been talking about this for a few days pa lang, but do we actually understand Omicron XE better at this point?
Omicron XE is a combination of your BA1, which is also highly transmissible, more transmissible than Delta, and your BA2, which is 30% more transmissible than your BA1. Now, you have XE, which is 10% more transmissible with BA2, then you have a recipe of a virus that is really highly transmissible.
But in terms of its impact on the health, in terms of the symptoms
severity
that it delivers, kamusta po siya?
Okay. Now, kung titingnan natin ang mga experience sa UK, no, which we reported the XE January, okay, there are in the data by UK, marami-rami rin ang na-hospital, and these are the 60 years old and above. These are the vulnerable population. So that means that if you belong to this vulnerable population and you know that there's a virus that is less virulent, that can only cause mild symptoms sa younger population, it may not be in the case for those who are 60 years old and above and immunocompromised.
Sir, balikan ko lang yun, balikan ko lang yung boostering. What I've been hearing kasi is that a lot of people naging kampante na because they've had already the primary doses, and we're back to alert level 1. So it's like back to normal na yung mga tao and back to work. Basically, a lot of people apparently don't think anymore of the need to have boosters kasi they'd rather go to work than spend time going to line up. I suppose that's the bigger challenge now for government. How do you convince, or if not convince, scare people into realizing na hindi forever and ever ang primary shots?
Alam mo, Ed, people are not scared anymore, no? Because we have seen that even if they were vaccinated during January, they still had COVID, but they only developed mild symptoms, no? So naging kampante na, this is just a mild COVID. This will not give you severe form of infection. That's the fact, bumaba na yung kaso, no? So there's this reality na talagang it's a less virulent type of virus that will not really scare people. Unlike the Delta, na talagang pag na-infect ka, Makikita mo yun sa bahay pa
Yeah.
lang, hingal na hingal. Hindi na natin ito nakikita noong January, except for some population, except the vulnerable population. So, I don't know if people are still scared about that kasi hindi na nakita yun. Ang nakita nilang Omicron, mild lang, ubo, pagod, tapos nawawala. Now, that is a challenge to the government now because until such time na hindi mo gagawing mandatory yan, okay, when I say mandatory, hindi ka makapasok kung wala kang booster, then nobody will really make pansin sa booster. And that's the truth now. Nakikita natin, nilalangaw na yung mga vaccination center natin.
Di ba merong campaign na mag-house to house? Some LGUs have started it. Pero sabi ni President Duterte, i-order daw niya. Are you in favor na gawin yung widespread, nationwide? Na house to house done? Will that work?
It may increase, but again, halimbawa, pupunta sa bahay, tapos sasabihin ko lang naman, ayaw kong magpabakuna. So wala pa rin tayong habol noon, no?
Hindi pwede talaga ipilit siya.
Hindi, kasi may pipirmahan yan, Lucho eh. Ami, may pipirmahan eh.
Okay.
Yes. You need consent, ano? Anong alternative kaya doon? Ano pang pwedeng gawin?
Isabay mo sa sa balota.
Dapat may...
Wala kang balota.
Gaya na sabi ko kanina, dapat may shortage. pagka may shortage, biglang labasan na naman yung mga tao.
Oo, may benta pa yan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Pagkahirap.
But we do thank you, Doc, na despite ng mga paghihirap na to, you're still there. Ilang taon na po kayo na dyan, plugging away. Maraming salamat po. We really appreciate your effort, sir.
Thank you, Robby.
Ingat, Doc.
Thank you, Ed and Ami. Bye-bye.
Dr. Ront Jean Solante po. And that's all for this edition of the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Mami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Ed Lingao, and we are One News.